I'm Olive, 29, the daughter who was never enough. In my family, beauty and success were everything, and I failed at both. Labeled the ugly high school grad, I was disowned 11 years ago for choosing my dreams over their expectations. Now, a successful architect, I received a wedding invitation from my sister Ashley. When her husband asked, "You know her?" my answer changed everything. Before I share my journey of rejection and redemption, let me know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories about standing your ground and finding your worth, hit subscribe and join me. My parents, James and Diana Watson, built their lives around appearances. Our sprawling Connecticut mansion with its manicured gardens and marble floors was the perfect backdrop for their social ambitions. My father's law firm represented some of the wealthiest clients in New England, while my mother dedicated her life to climbing social ladders and organizing charity galas that had nothing to do with actual charity. In this picture-perfect family stood my sister Ashley, 3 years older, naturally beautiful and effortlessly accomplished. She had our mother's high cheekbones, our father's confident smile, and a genetic lottery win that made her tall, slender, and graceful without trying. Ashley collected achievements like trophies, valedictorian, homecoming queen, tennis champion, and eventually Yale graduate. Every conversation in our house somehow circled back to Ashley's latest accomplishment. Then there was me. I inherited none of my family's photogenic qualities. Throughout my teens, I battled severe cystic acne that left scars no expensive cream could hide. I was shorter, curvier, and struggled with the weight my mother constantly reminded me about. "Olive, darling, maybe skip dessert tonight. Those jeans are looking rather snug." These helpful suggestions came daily, usually at the dinner table where everyone could hear. School wasn't my sanctuary either. Where academics came naturally to Ashley, I fought for every B minus. My teachers labeled me underachieving, despite hours of studying that never translated to the perfect grades my parents demanded. Dyslexia wasn't diagnosed until much later, so everyone, myself included, believed I simply wasn't trying hard enough. Our family dinners were performances of perfection, punctuated by my failures. Ashley secured another internship at Judge Patterson's office, my father would announce proudly, then turn to me with thinly veiled disappointment. "And Olive still enjoying your doodling, I see." My architectural sketches were doodles. In his eyes, my passion dismissed as childish hobby. When friends visited, I became invisible. Our home transformed into a showcase where everything gleamed, including Ashley. Designer clothes filled our closets, though mine often remained in their bags, as my mother claimed certain brands just aren't cut for your body type, dear. Our driveway housed luxury cars my father replaced annually, not for necessity, but because the Richardsons just bought the new model. My only ally was grandmother Margaret, my father's mother, who lived with us after grandfather died. She was from a different world, having grown up during the Depression. The family wealth came later, and she never quite adapted to my parents' obsession with status. She'd find me hiding in my room after particularly brutal family dinners, and tell me stories about her own awkward teenage years. "Beauty fades, talent remains," she'd say, examining my architectural sketches with genuine interest. "You see the world differently, Olive. That's a gift, not a flaw." Grandmother understood my passion for creating spaces. While my family valued appearances, I was drawn to substance, the feeling a well-designed building could evoke, how the right angles and light could make people feel safe, inspired, or connected. Under her encouragement, I transformed my bedroom into a mini studio walls covered with drawings of buildings that existed only in my imagination. When grandmother Margaret died suddenly from a stroke when I was 16, I lost more than a grandmother. I lost the only person in our house who saw value in who I actually was. At her funeral, my mother worried about the catering while I stood alone by the grave, clutching the set of professional drawing pencils grandmother had given me for my birthday. After her death, the pressure intensified. College applications loomed, and my parents had a clear vision I would attend an Ivy League business school, join a sorority filled with daughters of their friends, and eventually marry into a family that would strengthen their social connections. My decent but unremarkable grades made this plan unlikely, yet they refused to acknowledge reality. The Hamilton's daughter got into Princeton with similar grades. My mother insisted, ignoring that the Hamiltons had donated an entire library. You're just not applying yourself. Meanwhile, I researched community colleges with strong architectural design programs. Each brochure I collected became contraband, hidden under my mattress, like forbidden literature. Every night, I faced an impossible choice: pursue my passion and lose my family, or surrender my dreams to maintain their conditional love. As graduation approached, the temperature at home dropped to freezing. My father stopped asking about my day entirely. My mother scheduled consultations with admissions consultants who specialized in challenging cases. Ashley, home from her first year at law school, watched the tension build, but remained silent, unwilling to use her golden child status to defend me. I was trapped in a family that couldn't see me, in a house that never felt like home, counting down the days until everything would change, though I had no idea just how complete that change would be. My high school graduation fell on a perfect June day, the kind usually reserved for wedding photographs and tourist brochures. Blue skies stretched endlessly above our school football field as we sat in alphabetical rows, sweating beneath polyester gowns and square caps. When they called Olive Watson, I walked across the stage with a strange mix of pride and dread swirling in my stomach. Pride because, despite everything, I'd maintained a 3.2 GPA while working part-time at the local bookstore. Dread because I knew what waited at home: the elaborate graduation party my mother had been planning for months, not to celebrate my achievement, but to maintain appearances in front of their friends. Our circular driveway filled with luxury cars that afternoon. Caterers transformed our backyard into a white-tented dream with champagne fountains and a string quartet. My mother had commissioned a large banner reading, "Congratulations, graduate," carefully avoiding any mention of my actual name or accomplishments. I wore the dress she'd selected, a pale blue designer number that cost more than 3 months of my bookstore salary. For 2 hours, I smiled mechanically as my parents' friends offered congratulations, while simultaneously asking which prestigious university I'd be attending. Each time, my mother would swoop in before I could answer. "She's still weighing her options," she'd say with practiced lightness. "So many offers to consider." As the party reached its peak, I slipped away to the bathroom for a moment of quiet. Passing my father's study, I heard my mother's voice through the cracked door. She was with her 3 closest friends, the wives of my father's law partners. "Well, at least our ugly high school grad finally made it through." She laughed, the champagne evident in her voice. Though God knows what we'll do with her now. Ashley was already fielding law firm internship offers by this point. Her friend Barbara's syrupy voice responded, "Diana, don't be so hard on yourself. Some children just don't get the better qualities from the gene pool. You've done what you could." "James is beside himself," my mother continued. "All that money on tutors and coaches, and for what, community college aspirations and those ridiculous building drawings." I stood frozen, my graduation cap still clutched in my hand. I'd always known they were disappointed in me, but hearing the naked contempt in my mother's voice and the casual cruelty with which she shared it with others crystallized something inside me. 17 years of trying to earn their approval suddenly felt like a wasted life. I returned to the party with ice forming around my heart. As the evening progressed, my father, loosened by expensive scotch, clinked his glass for attention. His speech began with glowing praise for Ashley, who stood uncomfortably at his side, recounting her academic trajectory and current law school triumphs. "And now," he pivoted, gesturing toward me with a dismissive wave, "our younger daughter joins the ranks of high school graduates." The pause that followed spoke volumes. While her path has been different from her sisters, we remain hopeful that she'll eventually find her way to more practical pursuits than her current artistic flights of fancy. Scattered polite applause followed. Ashley caught my eye across the crowd, her expression apologetic but silent. She'd never openly contradicted our parents, her privileged position too comfortable to risk. Something broke inside me then. Maybe it was years of accumulated hurt, or perhaps just the sudden startling clarity that comes with having nothing left to lose. I stepped forward, taking the microphone from my father's hand. "Thank you all for coming today," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "I do have news about my future plans that I'd like to share." The crowd quieted, Glasses paused midway to lips. I've been accepted to Hartford Community College's architectural design program, which I'll be starting this fall. The silence was deafening. My father's face darkened to a dangerous shade of purple. My mother's practiced smile froze on her face like a death mask. Their program has an exceptional placement rate with major firms. I continued facts I'd researched tumbling out, and transfers to four-year architectural programs at— My father snatched back the microphone. Olive is joking, of course, he laughed stiffly. She'll be taking a gap year to prepare for proper business school applications. The party atmosphere curdled as guests sensed the tension. Groups began drifting toward the exits, murmuring excuses about babysitters and early morning commitments. After the last guest departed, my father cornered me in the kitchen, his voice low and dangerous. What the hell was that little stunt? It wasn't a stunt, I replied, surprised by my calm. It's my plan. It has been for months. No daughter of mine is attending community college to draw pictures, he spat. You will apply to real school's business law medicine, something worthy of this family's name. Architectural design is a real discipline, I countered, and I'll be good at it. My mother entered, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? The Preston's daughter just got into Dartmouth. I'm not the Preston's daughter, I said. I'm me, and I'm going to study architecture. My father slammed his hand on the counter. Here's how this works. You will apply to at least 5 Ivy League business programs. If you're accepted, we'll continue supporting you. If not, we'll discuss alternatives. Acceptable alternatives. That community college nonsense ends tonight. The ultimatum hung in the air, heavy and final. 17 years of conditional love of never being enough crystallized in that moment. No, I said simply. Excuse me. My father rarely heard that word. I said no. I'm going to study architecture. If you can't support that, I understand, but I won't change my plans. My mother gasped theatrically. My father's expression hardened from anger to something colder, more final. Then you're on your own, he said flatly. No tuition, no allowance, no car, no cell phone, nothing. If you're adult enough to defy us, you're adult enough to support yourself. James, my mother interjected, not out of concern for me, but from fear of scandal. Think of what people will say. We'll tell them she's taking time to find herself, he dismissed. Traveling or some such nonsense. No one needs to know our daughter chose to be ungrateful after everything we've given her. I looked around the kitchen at the Viking stove my mother had installed, but rarely used the marble countertops, selected to impress guests, the crystal glasses that had never held anything as common as milk or water. Everything in this house was for show, including their children. Ashley had played her part perfectly. I never could. I'll pack my things, I said quietly. You have until morning, my father replied. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom for the last time, each step feeling both terrifying and strangely liberating. Through my door, I could hear my parents arguing. My mother concerned with appearances, my father insistent that I needed to learn my lesson. I pulled my suitcases from the closet and began sorting through my life. Clothing went first, practical items, only nothing my mother had purchased for social events. Books, my architectural drawings, the special pencils from grandmother, personal photographs, but none of the formal family portraits. As midnight approached, my life had been reduced to 2 suitcases and a backpack. A soft knock interrupted my packing. Ashley stood in the doorway, her perfect features troubled in the dim light. You can't seriously be leaving, she said, entering and closing the door behind her. What choice do I have? I continued folding clothes. Stay and surrender everything I want from life. Ashley sighed, sitting on my bed. You know how they are. Just tell them you'll reconsider, apply to a few business schools to keep them happy, then change your major later. That's your approach, isn't it? I asked, not unkindly. Compromise until there's nothing left of what you actually want. Her silence confirmed my suspicion. Ashley had never wanted law school. Her passion had been marine biology since our childhood visits to the aquarium. But she'd buried that dream so deeply, she probably no longer recognized its absence. They'll calm down eventually, she offered weakly. Maybe, but I won't be here when they do. I zipped my final suitcase. Ashley reached into her pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "Take this," she said, pushing it into my hand. Inside was $500 in cash. "It's not much, but it might help until you figure things out." "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved by this small rebellion. "Where will you go?" she asked. I hadn't thought that far ahead. "I don't know yet. I'll figure it out." Ashley nodded, stood awkwardly for a moment, then hugged me briefly before leaving a gesture that felt both meaningful and utterly insufficient. At 1 a.m., with the house silent and dark, I carried my luggage downstairs and out the front door. I didn't leave a note. What was left to say? The warm summer air hit my face as I walked down our long driveway one final time. The weight of my suitcases, nothing compared to the years of disapproval I was leaving behind. At the end of our street, I turned back for one last look at the house where I'd never belonged. Its windows were dark, its occupants asleep, unaware or unconcerned that their family had just permanently shrunk by one. I had exactly $703 to my name, no clear destination, and a future clouded with uncertainty. And yet, for the first time in years, I could breathe. The first 2 weeks of independence taught me more than 17 years under my parents' roof. Reality hit hard and fast when I checked into a roadside motel that charged $50 per night, a rate I initially thought was reasonable, until quick math revealed it would deplete my funds in less than 2 weeks. The motel room became my war room. I spread newspapers across the faded floral bedspread, circling apartment listings and job opportunities with the same red pen I once used for architectural drawings. Every morning, I'd walk to the public library to use their computers, sending out applications and researching affordable housing options. My first stroke of luck came when I spotted a help wanted sign at a coffee shop near the community college. The manager, Irene, hired me on the spot after I told her I could start immediately and had open availability. The pay was minimum wage, but it came with free coffee and day-old pastries, small luxuries that meant everything when every dollar mattered. The housing search proved more challenging. My lack of credit history or employment references left landlords skeptical. After 10 days of rejections, I found a tiny studio apartment above a laundromat on the outskirts of town. The constant rumble of washing machines became the soundtrack of my new life, but at $600 monthly, it was within reach if I worked enough hours. One job wouldn't cover rent and tuition, so I added shifts at a bookstore 3 blocks from the coffee shop. Between both jobs, I worked from 5 a.m. to 6 p.m., rushed to evening classes, then studied until midnight before collapsing into exhausted sleep. Weekends meant picking up waitressing shifts at a local diner, where the tips sometimes meant the difference between eating properly and subsisting on ramen noodles. My first day at Hartford Community College felt like entering another dimension. The campus lacked the manicured lawns and Gothic architecture of the universities my parents had envisioned for me, but it offered something far more valuable: opportunity without judgment. In the architectural design program, my work mattered more than my appearance or family connections. Professor Jackson, the department head, became the mentor I desperately needed. A former firm partner who'd left the high-pressure world of commercial architecture to teach, he recognized something in my preliminary sketches that I hadn't yet seen myself. "You have an intuitive understanding of how people move through space," he told me after class one evening, reviewing my first project. "That's something that can't be taught. The technical skills will come with time." His encouragement came when I needed it most. 3 months into my new life, exhaustion had become my constant companion. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, my hands were perpetually chapped from dish soap and coffee grounds, and my body ached from standing for 12-hour shifts. There were moments, usually around 2 a.m., when I was struggling to complete assignments after a double shift, when I questioned everything. During these low points, I sometimes found myself staring at my phone thumb, hovering over my parents' contact information. One call could end this struggle, one apology, one surrender of my dreams, and I could return to material comfort. But each time I remembered my mother's voice, our ugly high school grad. The memory steeled my resolve. The greatest surprise of this difficult period was discovering friendship. In my parents' world, relationships were strategic alliances formed for mutual social advancement. At the coffee shop, I met Luis, a graphic design student with a booming laugh, who would cover my shifts when classes ran long. At the bookstore, my manager, Judy, a gray-haired woman with a doctorate in literature who'd chosen books over academia, would slip me damaged copies that couldn't be sold. My classmates came from backgrounds utterly foreign to my privileged upbringing. Maya worked full-time as a nurse's aide while raising 2 children and pursuing her degree. Tomas had immigrated from Guatemala and sent half his earnings back to family. Their determination made my struggles seem manageable by comparison, their friendship offering a community I'd never experienced. After my first semester, Professor Jackson approached me with an unexpected opportunity. The department has a scholarship opening for spring. The original recipient transferred to another school. He handed me an application. Your work qualifies. The deadline's Friday. That scholarship changed everything. Covering half my tuition, it allowed me to drop the waitressing job and focus more on my studies. My grades improved from solid to exceptional, and Professor Jackson began introducing me to working architects at local firms. By the end of my second year at community college, I'd built a portfolio strong enough to apply for transfer to state university architectural programs. With Professor Jackson's recommendation, I secured not only admission, but a merit scholarship that covered most of my expenses. The day I received my acceptance letter, I sat alone in my tiny apartment and cried not from sadness, but from the realization that I was succeeding on my own terms. No family connections had opened these doors. No one had judged me for my appearance. My work, my dedication, and my talent had created these opportunities. Moving to the state university meant leaving my first post-family home and the friends who'd helped me survive. Judy organized a goodbye gathering at the bookstore after closing, presenting me with a rare edition of Frank Lloyd Wright's writings. Luis and the coffee shop crew gifted me with a professional drafting table they'd collectively purchased. These tokens of genuine friendship meant more than all the expensive presents my parents had ever given me. University life brought new challenges and opportunities. The courses were more demanding, the competition fiercer, but I thrived in this environment. My unusual path community college transfer, working multiple jobs, living independently, since 18 gave me a perspective my classmates lacked. While they stressed over grades, I understood that failure wasn't fatal. I'd already faced my worst fear, complete abandonment, and survived. During my third year, I applied for an internship at Mercer & Associates, a respected architectural firm in Boston. The application process involved submitting a portfolio and completing a design challenge. When the acceptance email arrived, I had to read it 3 times to believe it was real. The internship meant commuting 2 hours each way 3 days a week, but the experience proved invaluable. Working alongside practicing architects, I absorbed knowledge that no classroom could provide. My supervisor, Alicia Mercer herself, took an interest in my development, allowing me to sit in on client meetings and contribute to actual projects. Your designs show remarkable empathy, she noted during my performance review. You think about how spaces make people feel, not just how they look in a portfolio. I graduated with honors, my senior thesis project featured in the university's showcase exhibition. Mercer & Associates offered me a full-time position starting immediately with a salary that finally allowed me to live without constant financial anxiety. The greatest reward, however, wasn't the job offer or the degree. It was standing at graduation scanning the audience, not for the family who had rejected me, but for the chosen family who had supported me. Professor Jackson beaming proudly from the faculty section. Judy and Luis, who had driven 3 hours to attend. My university friends cheering loudly when my name was called. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen, not for who others wanted me to be, but for who I actually was. The scared, rejected 18-year-old had transformed into a confident, capable professional, and I had done it entirely on my own terms. My 20s unfolded in ways my teenage self could never have imagined. After 3 successful years at Mercer & Associates in Boston, I received an offer from a cutting-edge firm in New York City. The position came with a substantial salary increase and the opportunity to work on more diverse projects. Though leaving Alicia's mentorship was difficult, she encouraged me to take the leap. "You've outgrown us," she said during our goodbye lunch. "New York will challenge you in ways Boston can't. Just promise to send me pictures of your first solo project." Moving to New York felt symbolic, a clean break from New England and all its connections to my former life. I found a small apartment in Brooklyn, falling in love with its pre-war details and large windows that flooded the space with natural light. For the first time, I could afford to furnish my home thoughtfully, rather than with whatever secondhand pieces fit my budget. At the new firm Baldwin and Partners, I quickly established myself as someone who could balance innovative design with practical constraints. Where some architects created beautiful buildings that ignored human needs, I designed spaces people actually wanted to inhabit. This approach caught the attention of senior partners who began requesting me specifically for client-facing projects. "You speak human," joked Richard Baldwin, the firm's founder, after a particularly successful presentation to a difficult client. "Half our team speaks architect, which is great for us, but confusing for everyone else." By 25, I became the youngest associate in the firm's history. My first major solo project, designing an eco-friendly community center in Queens, won an industry award for innovative sustainable design. Architectural Digest featured the building in their Designers to Watch issue, describing my work as humanistic modernism with unexpected warmth. Professional recognition boosted my confidence in ways I hadn't anticipated. The insecure girl who had been told she wasn't enough gradually faded from my consciousness, replaced by a woman who knew her worth. This transformation extended beyond my career into how I presented myself to the world. I developed my own sense of style, professional but distinctive, favoring architectural silhouettes and bold colors rather than the preppy pastels my mother had always pushed on me. Regular running along the Brooklyn waterfront and yoga classes addressed the stress of deadline-driven projects while changing my relationship with my body. I began to appreciate its strength and health, rather than focusing on the flaws my family had always highlighted. The acne that had plagued my teenage years improved with age, and proper dermatological care treatments I could finally afford myself. But unlike my mother, who viewed beauty as currency, I recognized these changes as simply part of growing up and taking better care of myself. My worth hadn't increased with clearer skin or a more toned physique. Those things had just stopped mattering so much. At 27, I made another leap, starting my own small firm with two colleagues from Baldwin and Partners. Jordan specialized in sustainable materials, while Hannah brought expertise in historical preservation. Together, we created Watson, Chen and Goldstein, setting up our office in a renovated warehouse space in Brooklyn. Our firm specialized in what we called sustainable luxury, high-end residential and small commercial projects that incorporated environmentally responsible practices without sacrificing beauty or comfort. This niche attracted clients who wanted distinctive spaces that aligned with their values, not just their aesthetic preferences. Our reputation grew steadily, with projects featured in design magazines and sustainability journals. The irony wasn't lost on me. I now moved in the same elite social circles my parents had desperately wanted to impress. The difference was that I'd earned my place through talent and hard work, not social climbing or family connections. My personal life evolved alongside my career. Dating in New York proved both easier and more challenging than I expected. Easier because the city offered endless opportunities to meet interesting people. More challenging because success attracted those interested in what I represented rather than who I was. After a few relationships with men who either found my ambition intimidating or tried to capitalize on my connections, I met Daniel at a sustainable building materials conference, an environmental engineer specializing in water management systems. He approached me after my presentation to discuss integrating his work with architectural design. Our professional collaboration gradually evolved into friendship, then something deeper. Unlike previous partners, Daniel appreciated my drive without feeling threatened by it. He had his own established career and understood the demands of creative professional work. More importantly, he saw me completely, my strengths and vulnerabilities, my accomplishments and insecurities. On our sixth date, I finally shared the full story of my family estrangement. We sat on a bench in Prospect Park, the setting sun painting the sky in dramatic oranges and pinks, as I detailed the graduation party and its aftermath. Daniel listened without interruption, his hand steady in mine. "Their loss," he said simply when I finished. "Though I can't say I'm entirely sorry it happened. You might not have become who you are without that push." His response struck me with its perception. I had often thought the same thing, but felt guilty admitting it. Being cut off had been painful, but ultimately liberating. Without the constant pressure to conform to my family's expectations, I had discovered my authentic self. As our relationship deepened, I sometimes caught myself wondering about my family. Had my parents told their friends the truth about my departure, or constructed some face-saving fiction? Had Ashley fulfilled their expectations, becoming the successful corporate lawyer they'd wanted? These questions would surface unexpectedly when passing Connecticut towns on the Amtrak to Boston, or when seeing father-daughter pairs at coffee shops. But no matter how curious I became, I never reached out. The silence between us stretched to 5 years, then 8, then a decade. A void so complete it seemed impossible to bridge. No birthday calls, no holiday cards, not even a Google search to see if I was alive. The thoroughness of their rejection confirmed I'd made the right choice in leaving. By 29, life had settled into a satisfying rhythm. My firm had grown to include 3 additional designers and an office manager. Daniel and I had moved in together, renovating a brownstone in Brooklyn to include both living space and a home office. We'd discussed marriage as a probable future step approaching the decision, with the same thoughtful consideration we gave to other life choices. I had built a life that exceeded my teenage dreams: meaningful work, loving relationship, close friendships, financial security. The family wound had scarred over, still visible, but no longer painful to touch. Or so I thought, until a cream envelope with gold lettering arrived in my mailbox on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday morning. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days, untouched, its heavy cream paper and gold embossed lettering disrupting the carefully constructed peace of my adult life. The return address belonged to the Stafford Country Club in Greenwich, Connecticut, one of those exclusive establishments where my parents had desperately sought membership throughout my childhood. I knew what it was without opening it. Wedding invitations have a distinctive weight and formality, even through sealed paper. What I couldn't fathom was why, after 11 years of complete silence, Ashley would invite me to her wedding. On the 4th day, with Daniel gently encouraging me to at least see what it says, I carefully broke the seal. The invitation was everything my mother would have selected: traditional script, multiple envelopes, response card with a tiny gold pencil. Ashley Diana Watson and Michael James Bennett request the pleasure of your company. The date was 6 weeks away. No personal note accompanied the formal invitation. No explanation for the 11-year silence. No acknowledgement of our fractured relationship. Just my name and address perfectly printed on expensive stationery, as though we'd spoken last week. "Are you going to go?" Daniel asked, watching me turn the invitation over in my hands, as if searching for hidden messages. "I don't know," I replied honestly. "I don't even know why she invited me." That evening, I sat at my computer, the blue light illuminating my face as I typed Michael Bennett into the search bar. Images appeared of a tall, classically handsome man with kind eyes and an easy smile, the son of former Senator William Bennett. Michael had followed his father's path into politics, currently serving as Connecticut's youngest state senator, with rumors of higher aspirations. A political family, of course. Ashley's perfect credentials: Ivy League education, conventional beauty, appropriate family background made her an ideal political wife. I wondered if my parents had orchestrated the match, or if Ashley had found her own way to their version of success. Further research revealed that Ashley had indeed become the corporate lawyer our parents wanted, working for a prestigious firm that specialized in mergers and acquisitions. News articles described her as brilliant and formidable in the courtroom. Professional photos showed her looking polished and confident, her smile practiced and perfect for cameras. "Maybe she wants to reconcile," Daniel suggested, finding me still at the computer past midnight. "People change in 11 years. Or maybe she doesn't want to explain my absence to her future in-laws," I countered. "Having a sister who disappeared might raise uncomfortable questions in political circles. Easier to invite me with the expectation I won't come." The invitation triggered a storm of emotions I thought I'd processed years ago. Anger at being discarded so easily by my family. Curiosity about their lives in the intervening years. A complicated yearning for the blood connections most people take for granted. And beneath it all, fear that seeing them again would somehow unravel everything I'd built since leaving. I called my oldest friend from my new life, Zoe, who had been my classmate at the state university and now worked as an urban planner. "If you go," she said, after listening to my conflicted thoughts, "you'll be doing it for yourself, not for them, to show yourself how far you've come, but only if you're strong enough to leave with your dignity intact if things go badly." I brought the question to my therapist, Dr. Rivera, who had helped me work through the family trauma during my early years in New York. "What outcome would feel healing to you?" she asked. "Not what you think should happen, but what would actually bring you peace." That question haunted me for days. What did I want from this potential reunion? Certainly not my parents' approval. I'd built a life without it and no longer needed their validation. Not Ashley's friendship too much. Silence had passed between us for easy reconciliation. Perhaps what I wanted was simply to be seen, to stand before the people who had deemed me unworthy and show them the woman I'd become, not with words or explanations or accusations, but with my mere presence. To close that chapter, not with a dramatic confrontation, but with quiet dignity. 2 weeks before the RSVP deadline, I checked the "will attend" box on the response card and wrote a single name in the space provided. No +1, despite Daniel's willingness to accompany me. This was a journey I needed to make alone. As the wedding date approached, my anxiety manifested in nightmares, dreams, where I showed up at the ceremony naked, or where my parents pretended not to recognize me. I increased my therapy sessions and added extra yoga classes, trying to prepare myself emotionally for whatever might happen. The practical preparations were easier to manage. I purchased a dress that reflected my current aesthetic, architectural in its simplicity, in a deep emerald tone that complemented my complexion. I booked a hotel room near the venue, rather than staying with family, creating an escape route if needed. I arranged for my own transportation, unwilling to rely on anyone else's timeline. The night before the wedding, I drove to Connecticut alone, my thoughts churning as familiar landscapes appeared along the highway. Towns I hadn't seen in 11 years triggered memories. The ice cream shop where we'd stopped after Ashley's tennis tournaments, the mall where my mother had dragged me for endless makeover attempts, the movie theater where I'd escaped on weekend afternoons. Checking into my hotel, I laid my dress carefully across the bed and stood before the mirror studying my reflection. At 29, I barely resembled the frightened teenager who had fled with 2 suitcases. My posture had changed, shoulders back, chin lifted, the stance of someone comfortable in their own skin. My style had evolved from the preppy clothes my mother selected to pieces that expressed my own aesthetic. Even my face had changed, not just from aging, but from living authentically. "You're ready for this," I told my reflection, not entirely convinced, but determined to proceed anyway. That night, I barely slept, rehearsing possible scenarios and responses. By morning, I'd settled on a simple approach. I would be polite but honest. I wouldn't cause a scene, but neither would I pretend the past hadn't happened. I would speak my truth quietly if asked, and otherwise simply observe. As I dressed for the wedding, applying minimal makeup and styling my hair into a simple updo, I realized I was preparing for more than a family reunion. I was preparing to face the final ghosts of my past, to stand in my truth before the people who had once defined me. Whatever happened, I would leave knowing I had confronted this last fear. The morning sun cast long shadows across the hotel parking lot as I slid into my rental car. The GPS indicated the Stafford Country Club was just 15 minutes away. 15 minutes separating the woman I'd become from the family who had never wanted her. "Whatever happens," I whispered to myself as I started the engine, "you've already won." The Stafford Country Club looked exactly like the kind of place my parents had always aspired to join: sprawling grounds meticulously landscaped, a Georgian-style clubhouse with white columns and black shutters, a fleet of luxury cars lining the circular driveway. As I handed my keys to the valet, I felt a momentary flash of imposter syndrome, quickly followed by the reminder that I belonged in spaces like this, now on my own merit. Uniformed staff directed wedding guests toward a garden area, where rows of white chairs faced an elaborate floral arch. I recognized familiar faces immediately: my father's law partners, my mother's social circle, distant relatives who had attended holiday gatherings throughout my childhood. Not one person gave me a second glance as I selected a seat in the back row. 11 years had transformed me from the awkward daughter into a complete stranger. The string quartet began playing classical selections as guests settled into their seats. I watched my father appear from a side door, looking older but still commanding in his tuxedo. His hair had grayed considerably, and his face showed new lines, but his posture remained that of someone accustomed to authority. He escorted my mother, elegant in pale blue, to their front row seats without scanning the crowd. Had they been told I might attend, or was Ashley's invitation sent without their knowledge? The ceremony proceeded with practiced perfection. Michael entered with his groomsmen, looking every bit the promising young politician in his tailored tuxedo. The bridesmaids followed in matching gowns, and then came Ashley on our father's arm. Her dress was a designer creation that probably cost more than a year's rent for my first apartment, all delicate lace and subtle beading that caught the light as she moved. She was beautiful, of course. Ashley had always been beautiful, but as I studied her face during the ceremony, I noticed something beneath the flawless makeup and practiced smile, a tightness around her eyes, a certain rigidity in her posture. She looked like someone playing a role rather than someone experiencing the happiest day of her life. The vows were traditional, the ring exchange smooth, the kiss appropriate for the conservative crowd. As the newlyweds processed back down the aisle, Ashley's gaze swept across the gathered guests. For a fraction of a second, her eyes met mine. The slight widening of her pupils was the only indication she recognized me, before her professional smile reasserted itself, and she continued walking with her new husband. During the cocktail hour, I remained on the periphery nursing a glass of champagne and observing the social dynamics I'd once been forced to navigate. The same air kisses, the same competitive compliments, the same strategic conversations designed to assess and establish social hierarchies. It all seems so transparent now, like watching actors perform a familiar play. No one approached me. I had become skilled at projecting calm self-assurance, and in this crowd that translated to someone they should already know, but couldn't quite place, perhaps a business associate's daughter or a distant cousin from out of town. This anonymity gave me time to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. The reception was held in the club's grand ballroom, with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the golf course. Place cards directed guests to assigned tables, and I discovered I'd been seated with distant relatives who had only met me a few times in my youth. Perfect strangers for all practical purposes. Throughout dinner, I participated in polite conversation, offering simplified versions of my life when asked. I'm an architect with my own firm in New York, I would say without mentioning my name or family connections. My tablemates seemed more interested in talking about themselves than questioning my presence. Another reminder of the self-absorption that characterized my parents' social circle. After the main course, the traditional wedding activities began: first dance, father-daughter dance, cake cutting. I watched my father waltz with Ashley, his proud smile never wavering for the cameras. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, the perfect picture of maternal emotion. The performance was flawless. As the formal program concluded and guests began mingling more freely, I noticed Ashley scanning the room from her position at the head table. When her eyes found me, she whispered something to Michael, who nodded and followed her gaze. Together they began making their way through the crowd in my direction. I took a deep breath and stood smoothing the front of my dress in a gesture that had more to do with steadying my nerves than actual wrinkles in the fabric. After 11 years of silence, this confrontation would define whether my journey had truly come full circle. Ashley reached me first, her professional smile fixed firmly in place. "You came," she said, the word somewhere between statement and accusation. "You invited me," I replied simply. Michael extended his hand, his politician's smile warm and seemingly genuine. "I don't believe we've met. I'm Michael Bennett." Before Ashley could jump in with an introduction that might minimize or obscure our relationship, I took his hand and met his eyes directly. "I'm Olive, Ashley's sister." His expression shifted to one of surprise, then confusion. "Sister, I didn't realize." He turned to Ashley, whose smile had frozen into something brittle. "You know her." The moment stretched between us, heavy with 11 years of unspoken history. Ashley seemed caught between social obligation and personal discomfort, unsure how to navigate this collision of past and present. I could have made it easier for her. I could have played along with whatever fiction she'd created about her family. I could have pretended our estrangement was mutual or temporary, or based on distance rather than rejection. Instead, I chose truth. I was once her sister, I said evenly, before I was labeled the family embarrassment and disowned 11 years ago. Michael's hand still holding mine went slack. His eyes widened as he looked between us, searching for family resemblance, and finding it despite our different styles and presentations. Disowned. He repeated the word, sounding foreign on his tongue. Ashley laughed nervously, a sound I remembered from childhood when she was caught in uncomfortable situations. Olive is exaggerating. We had a disagreement about her education choices, and she decided to, "Your parents called me the ugly high school grad," and cut me off completely when I chose to study architecture instead of business. I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. I left with 2 suitcases and $700. There were no calls, no letters, no attempts at reconciliation for 11 years, until this invitation arrived. Michael's expression transformed from confusion to something harder as he turned to his new wife. "You told me your sister was living abroad, that you drifted apart naturally but were trying to reconnect." Ashley's composure cracked slightly. "It's complicated, Michael. Family things usually are. This isn't the time or place to— When would be a better time to acknowledge your sister exists?" He asked, a new edge in his voice suggesting this revelation was triggering deeper concerns about honesty in their relationship. Before Ashley could answer, I noticed my parents approaching from across the room, their expressions shifting from social autopilot to shock as they registered my presence. My father's face hardened into the same mask of disapproval I remembered from my graduation night. My mother's eyes darted anxiously around the room, assessing who might be witnessing this unexpected family reunion. "What is she doing here?" my father demanded, as they reached our small group, addressing Ashley, while pointedly avoiding looking at me directly. "I invited her," Ashley replied, her voice small. "Without discussing it with us first." My mother's perfectly manicured hand clutched her husband's arm, her knuckles white with tension. Michael looked between all of us, his political training clearly battling with personal shock. "Mr. and Mrs. Watson, you never mentioned you had disowned your younger daughter." My father's attention snapped to Michael. "That's a family matter that's been grossly mischaracterized clearly. Olive chose to leave after rejecting our support for proper education. We've respected her decision to live independently." "Respected," I echoed, finding my voice. "Is that what you call pretending I don't exist for 11 years? Not even checking if I was alive or homeless or struggling?" My mother stepped closer, lowering her voice to avoid attracting attention. "This is neither the time nor place for dramatics, Olive. If you came here to make a scene and embarrass your sister on her wedding day, I came because I was invited." I interrupted. "And I haven't made a scene. I've been sitting quietly throughout the entire ceremony and reception. I wouldn't have approached you at all if you hadn't come over here." Several nearby guests were now watching our interaction with poorly disguised interest. My father noticed his jaw tightening further. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion somewhere private." "There's nothing to discuss," I replied. "I didn't come for reconciliation or confrontation. I came to witness my sister's wedding as invited. That's all." Michael, who had been observing this exchange with increasing discomfort, placed a protective hand on Ashley's back. "I think I need to understand what's happening here," he said, his tone suggesting this wasn't just about family drama, but about trust in his new marriage. "Ashley, you told me your family valued honesty and integrity above all. That's what attracted me to you, values that aligned with my own. But this feels like a significant omission." Ashley's composure finally cracked completely, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't know how to explain it," she whispered. "How do you tell someone that your parents threw your sister away because she wanted to study architecture instead of business? How do you explain that kind of conditional love without making your entire family sound horrible?" The raw honesty of her statement hung in the air between us. For the first time, I glimpsed the burden Ashley had carried maintaining the perfect daughter facade while knowing what had happened to me. My father stepped between us, his voice low and dangerous. "That is enough. We are not doing this here." Ashley, you and Michael need to return to your guests. We'll discuss this family matter later. Michael stood his ground. With all due respect, sir, I've just discovered my wife has a sister I knew nothing about, who was apparently cut off from your family for pursuing her education. As someone who believes family is the foundation of society, I find this deeply concerning. Perhaps we should all take a moment to— You don't understand our family dynamics, my mother interjected, her social smile strained to breaking. Olive made choices that— I chose to study architecture instead of business, I stated clearly, looking Michael directly in the eyes. That was my crime. I graduated with honors, built my own successful firm in New York, and created a life I'm proud of without any support from my family. I didn't come here today to rehash the past or cause problems. I came because despite everything, Ashley is still my sister, and she asked me to be here. My simple, dignified statement silenced everyone momentarily. In that pause, I realized I had achieved exactly what I'd come for, to stand in my truth, before the people who had rejected me, neither begging for acceptance nor lashing out in anger, but simply existing as the woman I had become. Michael looked at me with new respect, then turned to Ashley. I think we need to talk, really talk. After the honeymoon? Ashley nodded, tears still threatening to spill over her perfect makeup. She reached out tentatively and touched my arm, the first physical contact between us in 11 years. I'm glad you came, she whispered, before Michael guided her back toward their other guests. Left alone with my parents, I expected more anger or accusations. Instead, my father simply said, You should go, his voice flat with dismissal. I looked at him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in my adult life. The powerful, intimidating figure of my childhood had aged into a bitter man clinging to outdated values and superficial measures of worth. My mother, still beautiful but brittle with anxiety about appearances, avoided my gaze. I was already leaving, I replied calmly. Congratulations on the wedding. It was exactly what you would have wanted. As I turned to go, dignity intact, I felt lighter than I had in years, as though the last ghost of my past had finally been exorcised. I had faced my family not as the rejected daughter seeking approval, but as a complete person who no longer needed their validation to know her own worth. Walking through the elegant lobby toward the exit, I heard someone call my name. Turning, I saw Michael jogging to catch up with me, his expression troubled but determined. I apologize for what just happened, he said when he reached me. I had no idea about any of this. Ashley never mentioned a sister, let alone what happened to you. It's not your fault, I assured him. Maybe not, but it is my concern now. He hesitated, then continued. For what it's worth, I think what they did was wrong. Family doesn't throw people away over educational choices. He handed me a business card. If you're open to it, I'd like to talk more after Ashley and I return from our honeymoon. I think she might want to reconnect, but doesn't know how. I accepted the card, touched by his unexpected kindness. Thank you, and congratulations on your marriage. I hope you'll be happy together. As I walked to my car under the setting sun, I realized this confrontation hadn't gone at all as I'd imagined. Instead of closure through conflict, I'd found something unexpected. The possibility, however slight, of a new beginning with at least one member of my family. Whether that possibility would materialize remained to be seen. But for the first time in 11 years, the door wasn't completely closed. Driving away from the country club, I felt no regret for coming. No lingering anger. No desire for revenge or validation. I had stood in my truth, spoken it clearly, and walked away intact. The scared teenager who had left with 2 suitcases had returned as a complete, confident woman, and that journey, difficult as it had been, was something no one could ever take away from me. The next morning, I checked out of my hotel feeling strangely peaceful. The confrontation that had haunted my nightmares for weeks had happened, and I had survived it, more than survived. I had faced it with dignity and honesty. Driving back to New York, I found myself smiling at the realization that I no longer needed to fear my parents' judgment. I had looked into the face of their rejection once more and found it powerless to hurt me. Back in Brooklyn, Daniel was waiting with takeout coffee and a quiet understanding that I might need space to process. "How did it go?" he asked, setting my favorite latte on the kitchen counter. "Surprisingly okay," I replied, recounting the wedding, the confrontation, and Michael's unexpected outreach. It wasn't the dramatic showdown I'd feared. It was just sad. They're still exactly who they've always been, but they don't have power over me anymore. "And how do you feel about that?" Daniel's question was gentle but probing. I considered it seriously. Relieved, free, maybe a little sorry for them. That evening, I called Dr. Rivera for an unscheduled therapy session, wanting to process my feelings while they were still fresh. "You experienced what many trauma survivors seek, but few achieve," she observed. "You confronted your past from a position of strength and saw it clearly for what it was." The next few days passed in a strange liminal space. I returned to work, attended meetings, reviewed designs, but part of my mind remained engaged with the wedding confrontation, turning it over like a complex puzzle. I found myself thinking about Ashley more than my parents, about the tears in her eyes, her admission that she hadn't known how to explain our family's dysfunction without revealing its ugliness. 5 days after the wedding, my phone lit up with a text message from an unknown number. "This is Michael Bennett. I know we're supposed to be on our honeymoon, but Ashley hasn't been able to stop thinking about seeing you. Would you be willing to meet with her when we return next week? Just the two of you." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "I'd be open to that." The following week, as arranged, I met Ashley at a quiet cafe halfway between New York and Connecticut. She arrived looking far different from the polished bride, wearing minimal makeup, hair pulled back, simply dressed in casual clothing that reminded me more of the sister I'd known in childhood than the corporate lawyer she'd become. Our greeting was awkward. Not quite a hug, more than a handshake, an uncomfortable hybrid that reflected our uncertain status. We ordered coffee and found a table in the corner away from other patrons. "Thank you for coming," she began, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her cup. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either," I admitted. A heavy silence settled between us, 11 years of unspoken words, creating a chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. "I should have reached out sooner," Ashley finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "After you left that night, I told myself you'd come back once you calmed down. When weeks passed, I convinced myself you were just being stubborn. Then months turned into years, and it became easier to pretend you were fine, that you'd chosen to leave rather than being forced out." "I was forced out," I said quietly. "I know." She met my eyes directly for the first time. "I know that now." But acknowledging that meant acknowledging what our parents did, what I allowed them to do, by staying silent. The raw honesty in her voice surprised me. This wasn't the carefully curated persona I'd seen at the wedding, but something more vulnerable and authentic. "They've changed in some ways," she continued. "Dad had a minor heart attack 3 years ago. It scared him, but didn't fundamentally change him. Mom drinks more than she used to, too many social glasses of wine that start earlier each day. The perfect family facade has cracks, though they pretend not to notice." "And you?" I asked. "Has marriage to a politician been everything they wanted for you?" Ashley's laugh held no humor. "They're thrilled, of course. The Bennett family connection is everything they could have wished for. But Michael—" She paused. "Michael is actually a good man who believes in the values he promotes. He was horrified by what happened at the wedding, not just that they disowned you, but that I hid it from him." "Why did you hide it?" The question had been circling in my mind since the confrontation. She stared into her coffee. "Shame, mostly. How do you tell someone you're dating that your family discards people who don't fit their image? What does that say about you that you stayed in that environment?" She looked up, her eyes glistening. "And fear. Fear that if I acknowledged what happened to you, I'd have to face how complicit I was in it." Her honesty disarmed me. I had expected excuses or minimization, not this raw acknowledgement. "I've spent years trying to be perfect," she continued. "Perfect grades, perfect career, perfect fiancé, now perfect wife. Every achievement was partly to ensure I'd never face what you did, rejection for being insufficiently valuable to the Watson brand." For the first time, I glimpsed the prison Ashley had built for herself. A gilded cage, certainly, but a cage nonetheless. While I had faced the terror and hardship of being cast out, she had endured the constant pressure of conditional acceptance. "Are you happy?" I asked directly. "Not with your achievements or status, but with your actual life." The question seemed to catch her off guard. She blinked rapidly, then admitted, "I don't know, I don't think I've ever asked myself that question. Happiness wasn't the goal, security was." We talked for hours, moving beyond the awkwardness into genuine conversation. Ashley described her corporate law career prestigious but unfulfilling. I shared stories of my struggle to establish myself as an architect. She admitted she'd secretly Googled me over the years, watching my rise from afar, but never working up the courage to reach out. "I saw that article about you in Architectural Digest," she confessed. "I bought 5 copies and kept one on my nightstand for months, though I told Mom it was for a client when she noticed it." The revelation touched me unexpectedly. "Why did you finally invite me to the wedding?" I asked the question that had puzzled me from the beginning. Ashley looked down, then met my gaze directly. "Michael talks constantly about family values. As we got closer to the wedding, the lie about not having a sister felt heavier. I thought maybe if I invited you, I could begin to fix things without having to explain everything. It was cowardly, I see that now." As afternoon faded toward evening, we began discussing the possibility of a relationship moving forward, not pretending the past hadn't happened, but building something new with clear boundaries and honest communication. "I can't promise anything regarding our parents," Ashley said. "They're unlikely to acknowledge any wrongdoing. Dad's too proud, Mom's too committed to appearances." "I'm not asking for a full family reconciliation," I clarified. "That ship sailed years ago. But you and I, maybe we could try to know each other as the adults we've become." Before we parted, Ashley handed me a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. "I kept this for you," she said. "I always hoped someday I'd have the chance to return it." Then later that night, in the privacy of my Brooklyn brownstone, I carefully unwrapped the package to find Grandmother Margaret's antique silver locket, the one she'd worn daily until her death, containing tiny photos of her parents. She had promised it to me on her deathbed, but it had disappeared after the funeral. I had assumed my mother had claimed it for herself. "Ashley rescued it for you," Daniel observed, watching me cradle the locket. "That suggests she was thinking of you even back then." The following months brought cautious rebuilding. Ashley visited New York twice, touring my firm and meeting Daniel. I showed her the brownstone renovation, explaining the architectural choices that reflected my personal philosophy about living spaces. Each conversation became a little easier, the weight of the past a little lighter. In November, 6 months after the wedding, Ashley invited me to Thanksgiving dinner, not at our parents' house, but at her new home with Michael. "A small gathering," she promised. "Just us, Michael, and a few close friends. No pressure, no drama." I accepted, bringing Daniel and a portfolio of my recent work that Ashley had expressed interest in seeing. The dinner wasn't perfect. There were still moments of awkwardness and careful navigation of sensitive topics, but it felt like genuine progress. As we were leaving, Michael pulled me aside. "Thank you for giving Ashley another chance," he said quietly. "She's different when you're around, more authentic, less concerned with appearances. I think she needs that." "Maybe we both do," I acknowledged. The journey toward healing wasn't linear or simple. There were setbacks, a painful phone call when Ashley suggested I consider reaching out to our parents directly, triggering old defensive patterns. There were unexpected moments of connection, discovering we both still remembered word for word the bedtime stories Grandmother Margaret had told us, laughing together at shared memories of childhood pets and neighborhood characters. My parents remained distant figures, neither acknowledging my renewed relationship with Ashley, nor actively interfering with it. When Ashley mentioned them, I listened without reaction, neither encouraging reconciliation nor demanding she choose between us. That boundary, my refusal to re-engage with the source of my deepest wounds, was one she gradually came to respect. 1 year after the wedding confrontation, Ashley visited my office with an unexpected proposal. One of Michael's campaign donors wanted to build a community arts center in their district and needed an architect who understood how to create accessible, welcoming spaces. "I showed him your portfolio," she admitted. "He was impressed." The project became a tangible symbol of our rebuilt connection. Ashley using her network to support my work, me creating a design that incorporated elements inspired by our shared childhood experiences with art. When the center opened 18 months later, both our names appeared on the dedication plaque, hers as board member, mine as architect. The greatest healing, however, came not from professional collaboration, but from personal growth. In allowing Ashley back into my life with appropriate boundaries and honest communication, I discovered that forgiveness wasn't about excusing past actions, but about freeing myself from their continued power over me. The scared teenager who had fled with 2 suitcases had become a woman strong enough to choose reconciliation without surrendering her hard-won identity. On my 31st birthday, Daniel proposed during a weekend trip to the Massachusetts coast. As we celebrated with friends back in Brooklyn, I found myself thinking about the long, complicated journey that had brought me to this moment of genuine happiness. I had lost my birth family, but created a chosen one built on acceptance rather than conditions. While preparing for our small, intimate wedding, I received a letter from my mother, the first direct communication in 13 years. Inside was a check for a substantial amount and a brief note: "For your wedding, your father doesn't know." No apology, no acknowledgement of past wrongs, just this awkward olive branch extended from a distance. I returned the check with a polite but firm note: "Thank you for thinking of me, but Daniel and I have everything we need." It wasn't spite that motivated my refusal, but the certainty that financial gifts wouldn't heal what had been broken. Only honest reckoning with the past could do that, and my parents remained unwilling to undertake that difficult work. Ashley served as my maid of honor, her speech at our reception, acknowledging both the years of separation and the healing that had followed. "Sometimes the people who should love us unconditionally fail at the task," she said, raising her glass. "And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we get a second chance to build the relationships we deserve." As I move forward in my life, building my firm, planning a family with Daniel, nurturing my rekindled relationship with my sister, I carry an unexpected lesson from those painful years of rejection. Family isn't defined by blood or obligation, but by love and respect freely given. The people who hurt me most deeply gave me the unwitting gift of freedom to discover who I truly was, separate from their expectations and demands. The frightened 18-year-old who left home with 2 suitcases could never have imagined the life waiting on the other side of that pain. By losing everything familiar, I found my authentic self and built a life richer and more meaningful than anything I could have achieved by surrendering my dreams for conditional approval. Sometimes the greatest act of self-love is walking away from those who cannot see your worth. And sometimes the most profound healing comes from standing in your truth, not with anger or vengeance, but with the quiet dignity of someone who knows exactly who they are and what they deserve. Have you ever had to walk away from a relationship to save yourself? How did you find the strength to rebuild your life afterward? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey of rejection and redemption resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more authentic conversations about family healing and finding your worth. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes losing what you thought you needed becomes the path to finding what you truly deserve.